Hi and welcome to the IT Service Management Mentor. I thought I would just spend a bit of time going through some of my notes that I put together when I was studying the ITIL4 Foundation exam, and thought it would be useful just to talk through some of those items and some of the revision that I did in order to pass the exam. So the areas I focused on are around the dimensions, so there's the 4 dimensions and the associated factors, the guiding principles, the service value system, sometimes called SVS, the service value chain, SVC, and some of the management practices. So there's 34 management practices. I didn't go through all of them for the exam, for the foundation exam, but I did go through all of them just to re-familiarise myself, coming from an ITIL3 to an ITIL4 background. Okay, so the elements and the concepts I focused on. So the ITIL service value chain. If you've got a diagram, if you've seen a diagram of that, you'll notice there's plan, engage, design, transition, obtaining. So maybe it's a service pack that needs to be obtained or something needs to be built, deliver and support, and improve. And there's a way I remembered that was PIDOD, which was P, plan, I, improve, E, engage, and then DOD, D-O-D, was design and transition, O was the obtain / build, and the deliver and support. The ITIL practices, so I took a quick glance through all of those in terms of the general management practices, the service management practices, and the technical management practices. The guiding principles, again, pay attention to those various elements, and the focusing on value. Value is such a key element of ITIL4 and comes through time and time again. Big emphasis on the value, but the sort of ITIL guiding principle, focus on value, start where you are, work iteratively, so progress iteratively, and then make sure you're getting feedback so you know how that's going. Do a bit, how's that going? Is it okay? Do a bit more, how's that going? Is it okay? Collaborate and promote visibility. The collaboration point, shared goals, shared focus, not the same as cooperation, but collaboration. Looking at things holistically, looking at the big picture, as they say, thinking, working holistically, keeping it simple. I like that. Keep it simple, keep it practical. Too often things get way too complicated and it becomes this huge complex beast to try and get your head around. Keep it simple, keep it practical. And then optimize and automate. Really look at those activities. Is there a better way of doing them? Can they be automated? Is there any kind of AI in there, or some ways things can be automated to make it easy, particular repetitive acts and tasks. So then the other area I looked at is around the governance piece, so the directing and controlling of the organisation, and then the CSI, the continual service improvement, and those 7 steps. So those were sort of the key elements, the key concepts I focused on. So if we think about ITIL practices, so note the term that practices, processes. ITIL3 was process. ITIL4 seems to be much more practice based. Terminology changes there. There are the general management practices, so architectural management, continuing improvement, security, knowledge, measurements, reporting. An interesting one around organisational change management, portfolio management, project management, relationship management, strategy, financial, risk, supplier management, service provider management, and then workforce and talent management. So those were the general management practice areas. For the foundation, I didn't go into a huge amount of detail on those. I just sort of refamiliarised myself with those concepts, and I think part of the syllabus for the foundation exam actually says the practices that you should be familiar with, but certainly not, it's not all of the practices. It's not, you need to know inside out all of those 34 practices. There's the service management practices, so availability management, business analysis, capacity, performance management, change enablement. Notice that term, change. It's not change management, it's change enablement. Problem management, monitoring, event management, asset management, such a difficult one to keep on top of things. Things change, things, new items are delivered, other items need to be removed from assets as they get decommissioned. Incident management, release, catalogue, service configuration, continuity, service level management. I'll just read off the remaining ones: service desk, service design, validation, testing, and service request. So all of those fall under the service management practices. And again, I have a particular interest in incident management. So I'm always kind of pulled towards that, and service desk functions and problem management functions. But those are all of the practices. I gave them a quick flick through and became familiar with them. And having come from an ITIL4 background, a lot of those are familiar in terms of those 26 processes that are there in the ITIL4 life cycle, as opposed to the 34 practices and the service value system. And then the final practice, so we've got general management practice, we've got service management practice. The third practice was technical management practice, and that looks at deployment, platform, infrastructure, development, software dev, and associated management. So I didn't go into finite detail on all of those practices, but I'd already got a good foundation of those processes within an ITIL4 environment. So just a good flick through all of those, really. What else did I get involved in? So in terms of those key items, such as the service value chain, the service value system, and the 4 dimensions and factors. So as a reminder, the 4 dimensions and the factors, so you have 4 dimensions. You have organisation and people, you have information and technology, partners and suppliers, and the value streams and the processes. And then around all of that, another way to look at it is at the centre of that is value. So you have the value to create those products and services, and then you have those 4 dimensions: organisation, people, information technology, partners, suppliers, value streams and processes. Now around all of those boxes you have something called the PESTLE factors, so things that impact them, some activities, factors that impact your thinking around those 4 dimensions. And the PESTLE factors are political factors, economical factors, social factors, technological factors, legal factors, and environmental factors. And the way I kind of read those are the ingredients, that is the core ingredients you need to create high quality products and services. So right at the center of that diagram is a value proposition. That's how you are going to deliver that value with the products and the services. So so if we just go into maybe a bit more detail really quickly around the organisation and people dimension. So I looked at organisational structures. There's different types of hierarchies in there. Thinking about culture, capacity, governance, competence, communications, interfaces. Those are the kind of areas I looked at for organisation and people dimension. For the IT dimension, the information and technology dimension, some of those questions of what are those technical components, what is needed to build to create that value, what are they, what's the support service management, what's the what do you need to create, what do you need to reference or change to deliver, what are those outputs. Fundamentally, what does the customer want, how can you go about doing that, what are the tools, what's in the service portfolio, for example, looking at things like CMDB, automation, knowledge base, service catalogue, queue management, event monitoring. What tools should be there for event monitoring? What about reporting? And then the security consideration. So those are the areas I looked at specifically for information technology dimension. The partners and suppliers. So kind of a real think through. Do you want, what's the capability? Do you want to run this in-house? Perhaps there are internal teams. What about externally though? What about the capabilities? Are there any capabilities to retain in-house, for example? Do the service providers have that specialist capability? Are there any operational risk considerations? Is there flexibility? Scarcity of resource, so looking at what are the actual what are the skills that are needed. So for example, perhaps an organisation may be low on DBA or SQL or cloud expertise. Partners, suppliers can help with that. Cost, of course, cost is always a consideration, is a big dimensional consideration. Relationships, so is there good relationships with the third parties, with the service providers? So yeah, those are the kind of areas I looked at from a partner and supplier. I won't go into much more detail on that. And then the value streams. So the value streams and the process dimension, looking at the service value chain. So that service value chain, remember the PIDOD way of remembering that, and mapping value streams. So the actual delivery process of a service, how are you doing it? And in that PIDOD diagram, you can map it through as to where are all the touch points, how's it being designed, what's the delivery and support mechanism, and following that pathway from your original demand, your opportunity, to that end point of value, delivering value, and looking at the different steps. It was useful. I think I did it on a couple of items. In terms of one of them, I mapped it through for creating a brand new service, and the other one was a major incident, a priority one incident, and following through all through that value chain and looking at that process, mapping that value stream and seeing, are there steps that could be automated, for example? What steps are being done manually? Are there any steps that are being completed by a third party? Are there any waste? Is there any areas that as you map a value stream and a process, as you map it through, are there areas that you're kind of thinking, why are we doing that? Why did we follow that step? Perhaps that could be looked at in terms of optimization, maybe. I mentioned the political factor, the PESTLE factors earlier, and I scribbled some notes down around. Okay, I get it. PESTLE factors: political, economical, social, technical, legal, environmental. Yeah. Just give me a bit more information about that. And I did a bit of research using the ITIL books, but I also looked wider field as well. So political considerations, I noticed I put on my scribbles, was around government policy. What about stability? Political stability, corruption, tax policy, labour. What about the labour laws and trade? Economical, I scribbled down about growth, exchange rates, interest rates, inflation. Does that have any impact? What about unemployment rates? What about disposable incomes? For the social, I put information down around population growth, age distribution, career attitudes, safety attitudes, appetite for risk, around health, lifestyle, cultural barriers. Technological, that was easier because that was more around my kind of understanding of what's the level of innovation, what about automation, what about R&D activity, change, awareness of technology, so on and so forth. And then the legal items, I looked at things like antitrust, employment laws, consumer protection, copyright, health and safety, patents, those kind of things. And then the obvious items for environmental is the weather, is the climate, any kind of policies there, pressure groups. So that was just an extra bit of sort of study I did, if you like, around PESTLE factors. So the guiding principles, so there was 7 guiding principles. Really quickly: focus on value, start where you are, progress iteratively with feedback, work collaboratively and promote visibility, think holistically, keep it simple, keep it practical, and look for opportunities to automate and optimize. So key messages to consider for each one of those: focus on value. Everything an organisation does needs to map to value for your stakeholders. Consider customer experience. Start where you are. Really good guiding principle. Try and avoid to start from scratch. If you are starting from scratch, really just ask that question. Really? Is there nothing else we can utilise? Is there not some system or software or knowledge or information? Do you really need to start from scratch? And I've certainly worked in a number of organisations where the belief is the only way we can address this and go forward on this is we completely knock everything down and start again. Just understand the current state. Progress iteratively in feedback. So clearly, don't try to do everything at once. Think about it in more small, manageable sections. Things that can be executed and delivered in a timely manner. Collaboratively. So work together across those barriers. Look at it as an ecosystem, as a landscape. How can you get across those barriers? Look at objectives that you can deliver collaboratively. Build that trust. The holistically, thinking work holistically. Nothing stands on its own. There's always something that relies on something else, a service or an element. It doesn't stand alone. There's moving parts to any service. You're going to have, perhaps there's internal teams, external teams, technology, different types of contracts, different types of agreements, resourcing. Just think outcomes, think about those outcomes, and then kind of just look at it holistically. Who's involved in this? Who's being coordinated? What are the various moving parts to that? Keeping it simple and practical was the second to last one. Does the process, does the service, does the action, whatever it is, does it provide value? You'd be surprised how often you may come across when you look at things. Why is it so complicated? Why are we making it so complicated? Keep it simple, keep it practical, simplify. Look at every process and stream and really ask your question, is it providing value? And then the final one around automation and optimization. Look at those repetitive tasks. It doesn't need to be super clever. There are ways of automating opportunities. It will help with things like accuracy as a really obvious answer. Us as humans, sometimes we get tired. We make mistakes that not intentional, but there are definite ways of improving accuracy, improving work effort, improving the amount of time it takes. Is human intervention really needed? The other point I noticed about these principles, actually just thinking about it, was that these kind of principles are common sense, but you'd be surprised. But they also start to pop up in some of those other frameworks. So I've certainly seen this language come through in COBIT or in DevOps or Agile or Lean. So these aren't new radical principles that are brand new. They appear in other frameworks. This is A, is common sense, but B, it aligns to Lean, Agile, DevOps, COBIT, other kind of frameworks. So I just thought that was an interesting point that I'd scribbled down there in my study notes. So the service value system. So that there are 5 components to that, and it's about creating value to stakeholders. That there are various inputs. In my revision notes, I noticed, looking at the service value system diagram, that the opportunity, the demand is the trigger. That's what starts it off. There's an opportunity or there's a demand, perhaps an opportunity to create a new service, or perhaps there's demand because there's a P1 that's suddenly gone off and it needs fixing. So the other side of the service value system is the value. So you can kind of see it from an opportunity perspective, where it's, let's say, create a brand new service. Perhaps there's a commercial opportunity there, which ends up in value, of course. But the demand point I thought was quite interesting as well, in terms of, if it's a P1, what's the value? Well, the value is whatever service was unavailable and people weren't able to operate. The value is that's now fixed and people can work and people cannot operate. So the system is a way to map to map out the main elements, the capabilities that you need in order to run a highly efficient and effective agile service management organisation. So those were just my notes, really, that I'd put down. I think the value point, again, just thinking that through a little more as well, it is, you hear the expression create value for stakeholders, and I always struggle with that, in terms of, I immediately see value as a monetary number. It's making money, or it's reducing costs, but actually it's much wider than that. So other areas could be customer loyalty, or it could be lower cost. It could be growth. That value could be actually it's a brand new service. So there's lots of perceived benefits. Perhaps it's more useful. Perhaps it's more important. But just worth kind of tumbling that around in your mind a bit if you're going to sit the exam, just to kind of think what does that opportunity and demand on the left side mean, and what does that value bit on the right side of the diagram, what does that mean? I found that quite useful. So so that kind of talks through the system, the service value system. The diagram talks around, you've got the guiding principles, you've got the governance, you've got the service value chain, you've got those practices. Notice that terminology, practices, not processes, practices. And then the continual service improvement, and you have this opportunity demand on the left and value on the right. So that kind of talks about the service value system. The other area I focused on for the foundation exam was the service value chain, the SVC. So I've mentioned it earlier, that PIDOD was the way I kind of remembered it. Plan, improve, engage, design and transition, obtain and build, and the delivery and the support element. And then you have the demand on one side and you have the value on the other side. Opportunity, demand, value. And it's a set of interconnected activities that an organisation performs to deliver or to create value, a product or a service to its consumers. So it's facilitating value realisation. I wrote in my study notes that the phrase it maps demand to value, which I found quite helpful. It's an operating model to map demand over to that value piece. So that was just a phrase I'd scribbled down. So what does the PIDOD, the service value chain, what are those various elements? So planning is, as you might imagine, all types of planning at that level. The engagement is any interactions with people who are external to the service. External to the service value chain. So good examples being employees, customers, partners, service providers, suppliers. The design and transition piece, business analysis and dev of that new service. Obtain and build any new resource that you are bringing into the value chain. So if you like, items that have been sourced. I always use when I come to the obtain and build bit, I always kind of think of getting hold of a service pack. So during an incident, maybe it's been identified, we need to upgrade the service pack on this server or this laptop or computer, whatever it may be. And the obtain and build is you need to get hold of that resource. So service pack, you need to get hold of that. The deliver and support, so that's the provisioning of the services, and it's providing that help and information. And then the improve, as you might guess, it's about improving it, and it's improving it at all levels within that ecosystem. So that's a really useful term, actually, the ecosystem. So as a key takeaway, you can think the service value system as the map of services in the ecosystem. The service value chain are the bits that connect to it, if that makes sense. So perhaps a railway analogy might be that the service value chain is the rail network, and the service value streams are trains. I don't know if that works or not, but certainly service value chain, you map all of those items. Perhaps you go through engage first, then into plan, then design and transition, then obtain and build, deliver and support, and then that eventually goes over to the value piece. So kind of talked about the management practices. There are 14 general management practices, 17 service management practices, and there's only 3 technical practices. So there's lots of good diagrams available to look at the various practices and what they are. But I didn't focus massively on all of those practices for the foundation exam. But to be fair, I was familiar with all of them anyway, because I'd come from an ITIL3 world, so it wasn't this huge jump to lots of new practices and approaches. So that's kind of it. I practice-wise, I definitely looked at incident management. There's certainly plenty of information around incident management and ITIL4, and certainly areas like swarming, the swarming model. Best way I can describe that is just think of bees. So when there's a particular threat, or I mean, I'm not a beekeeper, I don't know, but bees swarm. They all come together. So it is. This swarming term has been introduced into the ITIL4 framework terminology. To be fair, Agile have been doing this for ages, but the swarming model is when there's an issue, lots of people. It's a collaborative based process. Everyone comes together and then works out, okay, what needs to be done, and who's actually needed in order to address this, and then the key people are there, as opposed to this I suppose escalation based process, which is you've got a level 1, you've got a level 2, you've got a level 3. So first off, the level 1 guys will look at it and see whether they can fix it, and if they can't, it goes to level 2 and level 3. So that was a new terminology within ITIL4 that I looked at. I also noticed the emphasis around the terminology of what an incident is, and that word of IT isn't in there in terms of what an incident is. I'd certainly encourage you to just have a clear view on the definition of what is incident management in ITIL4. Incident management is mainly involved in the engage and the deliver and support value chain activities, and it's less prescriptive. So ITIL4 refers to incident management as a service management practice, and it describes the key activities and the key inputs and the key outputs, roles. It's based on guidance for the organisation, and the guidance is to design a process for managing incidents in line with the specific requirements of that organisation. So there's still sort of process flows. You know, there's still good logic around logging, categorization, prioritization, investigation, communications, resolutions, reviews, closure, all of that stuff, absolutely. But there's a definite design it that's in line with your specific requirements. So the other thing about incident management that's worth being aware of is nothing stands on its own. So there is plenty of interfaces with other practices for incident management. So, for example, monitoring and event management. Maybe an alert of some kind has gone off and it's created, I don't know, maybe that alert is saying the server's gone down, or the network link's gone down, or utilization has decreased. So that may create an incident, an automated incident. There may be problem management practice that interfaces. Service desk certainly as a function interfaces with incident management. Service requests, change enablement, deployment management, platform management, project management, release, software dev, continual service improvement. There's lots of interfaces. So my study to go to the foundation exam was around not just thinking about what incident management was. It was around what are the other elements to it as well. So that was that around incident management. Can't really think of much more that I kind of focused on. There is a syllabus that if you want to do the exam, certainly make sure you have a look at what specifically is in the exam. There's definitely an element around terminology. So there was definitions. So things, all sort of the usual characters around. Recall a definition of a service. What is a service? The utility and warranty, the customer, the user. What is service management? What's a sponsor? So I kind of studied on those, if you like, and memorised those and understood them as to what the ITIL4 definition was of those items. So that I'm literally just kind of flicking through my notes, skimming through my notes as to what did I learn as I was learning about ITIL4 in readiness for the ITIL4 Foundation exam. I passed, so I just thought I would share some of my notes. I absolutely would recommend you get hold of the syllabus. Look at the learning outcomes, look at the assessment criteria, and then within that it will give you book references, and there's some information around Bloom's levels. But also, interestingly, there's points around the number of marks each area is given. So that's always useful to get an idea in terms of the weighting. But that's probably enough from me. Now, if you want to subscribe, please do subscribe. Hit that bell at the bottom as well. And I'll continue to post information around ITSM generally, SIAM, ITIL as well. And please subscribe. Please hit that bell. Thank you. Bye.